Hey everybody, how's it going? Another happy Friday. I see Rich out there, Joe's out there, Aussie Star Wars nerd. Hey everybody, it's good to see you. Ryan will be here in just a couple of minutes. I think he's running a little bit behind, but that's okay. That's all good. Hope you're all doing well. We're gonna keep this one kind of a tight one. I think we're gonna start doing these streams a little bit shorter than we've done in the past. So instead of doing a full hour, we're gonna kind of focus on like 30 minutes to 40 minutes, something like that. Just kind of keep it nice and tight. Everyone's got the weekend to enjoy. And so we're just not, dragging it on too long, but we enjoy doing it. We're going to be going through kind of some of the news this week, some of the news in Star Wars. There's a lot of it, so we want to talk through it. But in the meantime, just thanks for being here. I'm going to hang tight while we wait for Ryan to jump on. I'm very curious. Before we get started, did y'all see the news about Galactic Starcruiser over at Disney World? Let me know. There he is. There he is.
Hey,
how's it going, buddy?
It's going okay. It's going okay. I'm dealing with a new system. So I apologize because I have a brand new computer here and I've spent the last 15 minutes just trying to get my camera to come up on the screen. So I thank you very much for your patience.
No worries. No worries. I figured it'd be something like that. It always is, and it's always good. The demo gods don't always play nicely with us.
Oh yeah, that's the truth. Well, hey, it's great to be here. And we took a week off because you were away.
Yes.
But let's jump into something really quick. How was your vacation?
Dude, it was awesome. I've never been to New Orleans before, and it was a good time. Lots of good food, so many good, cool people. I mean, of course, lots of rad breweries because that's what we do. But no, we walked I think wife and I walked 30,000 steps a day every day. The first day we took the hop on, hop off, just so we could get a kind of feel of where is everything here. But then after that, we just walked everywhere, dude. So much good music, so much good food. It was an absolute blast.
Right on. That's awesome. I'm super happy for you all. I'm glad that you were able to have a really great time, a really great trip. I think that is great.
Yeah, it was a blast, and it's kind of interesting. So for anyone who's watching who doesn't know this, in addition to the Kessel Chat, another friend of mine and I do a show on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. on TikTok where it's a live stream where we live stream a book reading. So right now we are reading this book to everyone who watches live. It's the first young adult book in the Star Wars: The High Republic Phase 1. And so the way that we do it is I read one page and then she reads a page and we go through 2 chapters. Anyway, she is also a huge Star Wars fan like us, and her husband 2 weeks ago went to the Halcyon Legacy or the Galactic Starcruiser.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I heard about this, and that's huge that they were able to go because they're.
Yes, yep, they are closing. Oh shoot, Ryan just froze. That's okay. He'll come back in a second. Yeah, that's so Rich. That is the latest. Are you, Ryan? If you are still there, oh no, I don't know if you're still there. On the other stream, I think you might be frozen. That's okay. He'll come back in a sec. Anyway, yeah. So Joseph and Rich, everyone else watching, so my friend, she and her husband went to Galactic Starcruiser 2 weeks ago. Had an absolute blast. Took lots of TikTok videos, other kind of photos. It was they had an amazing time. And then last week they were on a separate vacation. And while they were on that vacation, or actually they got back from that vacation for a couple of days, and then I think it was just yesterday, it was announced that Galactic Starcruiser is going to be shutting down. The last cruise is going to be in. There he is. Hey. The last cruise is going to be. It's okay. I was just kind of carrying on a little bit. So she was there 2 weeks ago with her husband. Last week they were on it. They continued their vacation someplace else. And when they got home, they were home for a couple of days. And then yesterday morning, the announcement came out, and it was heartbreaking because, I mean, if you've read about it, it is literally an experience. You're there 2 days. It is an immersive experience for 2 days. It's not
very immersive. Yeah.
You're not just there in a hotel. To the point that my friend has made her husband have been twice now in the last couple of years, and this is the second time, and they've literally made friends with cast members. Like you interact with cast members so much while you're in the experience. They actually have friends now who are cast members who they have kept up with after their trip. Like it is that kind of an in detail kind of experience. So it is unfortunate. Bob Iger, I think, said it was a business decision, and honestly, it really, I think, comes down to cost. For a family of 4, I think it's like, for the 2-day experience, is like $6,000. For 2 people, it's like $2,500 or $3,000 for just for the experience for the couple of days. It's a lot. You'd have to get to Disney World first, so all the travel and expense to get there plus the cost. So it's not a very accessible thing to a wide number of people, which is too bad. I'm not throwing shade at it. I would have absolutely loved to go, but it's not financially accessible to a lot of people, and I think at the end of the day, it was just probably a little bit too much. And I mean, there's also a lot of political stuff going on in Florida at the moment. I think mostly it's a business thing. They did not have the use of the cruise the way they were hoping for.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Right. Uh-oh. I think we lost Ryan again. His new computer is just not doing him very well. Robert, you are right. It's I don't want to harp too much on the dollars and cents part of it, but yeah, it was not inexpensive. If you look into it, though, what you were paying for does make a lot of sense. Like you were getting out of it what you were paying for. So when I say it's immersive, it is not just you stay in a hotel and go to restaurants and stuff inside. You never leave the hotel, essentially. You're inside this thing, and there are, from the moment that you walk in the door, you are immediately part of an interactive storytelling thing that is happening with everybody else. Like, I think the price shocked Brian's vid connection, something like that. There he is. Drop that one. Bring you back in. There we go.
Fingers crossed.
And now you're calling. Another one's calling me in. I'll drop you back.
Everybody that's on the stream right now, I'm really been like, I was super excited, Jeff. Just for background on this, when this computer came in, I was like, finally, I will have a system that can keep up with Jeff. And I was like, this is gonna be great. And so this is the inaugural trial of this system, and it is failing left and right. So I just want to say to everybody in that Han Solo with the Millennium Falcon, I just leaned against it, and it's now working.
You're like smack the top of it kind of hard. It's like, oh, okay.
Boom, and it was like, yeah,
everything's fine.
So I had a little bit of Fonzie action there.
Exactly. The joke was basically the Empire must be censoring you at the moment.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, seriously, like everybody. I think the Floridians knew what I was about to say.
They're like, no.
Yeah. So I will say this about that experience. Someone described it to me as, do you like Star Tours? And I said, yes. And they said, do you like Galaxy's Edge? And I said, yes. And they said, now you're doing that for 2 days. And I was like, oh, okay, like that's pretty cool. And I didn't know about the whole cast that you were just talking about, because someone had to explain to me that when you go on this, it's like going on a cruise. And everybody that's there is in on it. And they're all participating with you, and it's just like the best.
But even like a step beyond that, where the moment you walk on, you are treated as if you were walking, like, not just, I mean, like you said, onto a cruise, but you're treated as if you were literally walking on to the Halcyon Legacy ship. Like, you are walking into a starship that is about to launch and take off, and every person who works there is completely in character. Like, there is no breaking character.
No one's getting out of character. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything that you're saying, like, no one's breaking character. So that's like a really unique kind of immersive experience. And I just think that that's also something that's of a world that we don't live in anymore, and that is a pre-pandemic world.
Yeah.
That was planned, because I remember when the planning for that came out. That was planned at the height of Star Wars, when the movies were still coming out, and before the pandemic. And I think that they could have probably let that run a little bit longer and then eventually get to some type of more economical solution. But those early years were all lost in the pandemic.
Yeah,
And
they really were.
and it's also hard now. Like even my own family, like we just travel differently now. And we love getting out. We love going to places. We're very much into the experience of being out in the world. But that's the other thing. We like being outside
Yeah.
in the world now. Like that's our
Mhm.
post pandemic. We've spent more time at national parks than anything else. But anyway, it's sad to see that. I also saw that Disney's making some pretty big moves in Florida. But I think that there's a lot of other things, and this is going to be, I know, Jeff, the topic of our conversation today, is there's a lot of business that's happening around Disney, that's happening around Star Wars. And the two biggest things are what's happening with the writer's strike and how that's going to affect shows like Andor, which we already know, The Mandalorian, the future of The Mandalorian, the future of a lot of Star Wars streaming properties, but then also the conversations on streaming services generally.
Yeah.
Like that is across the board. If you're watching the news today, whether it's Max, which is the new HBO thing, HBO Go, HBO Max, now just Max, Paramount Plus, who's honestly whose own analyst told them you should probably shut this down. Or now Disney Plus and what they're going to try to do with Hulu and everything else. It's a really interesting time because this is a business, it's a business, but it's affecting obviously the dollar of how much things cost to make and how much they're worth and the people that you have to pay. That's all now a part of what are we going to be able to see kind of in the future for Star Wars.
I totally agree. Yeah. Before we dive into that, because I think that's going to be a good chunk for us to talk about. One thing I did want to bring up is, let me show my screen here real quick if I can do this. Let's see if I don't break everything when I do it. All right, it works. My prep work actually works. Woohoo! Hang on a sec here. Oh, sorry, Joseph. I need to pull his stuff off the screen real quick. Okay. So this is just a small thing I wanted to touch on, but I don't know if anybody heard this rumor or saw this article, whatever, not this article, but like saw this tweet go up or heard about this at all. But so there was a bunch of rumor mill that spun up last week or earlier this week on this. It came out of this tweet right here. So basically everyone was posting everywhere that, oh my gosh, Dave Filoni's movie is going to be Star Wars Heir to the Empire. And he's, oh my gosh, that's what the new movie is going to be called. And wow, he must be dipping into the Timothy Zahn books and doing all this stuff. A mutual of mine on TikTok posted a video the other day about this. And essentially what he said, and several others have now said, is the only basis for that, and I'm going to get to a larger point here in a second, but the only basis for that story or that idea that came out is this tweet that you're seeing on the screen. This is it.
Yeah.
Nothing came out from anybody else other than this person. And further, I think in the thread said they got it from a quote insider, a reliable insider that they heard information from. This is the only source for this. And I wanted to call this out because it leads into our larger topic, which is, we all should know this already, but you can't believe everything you read online. You just can't. Yeah. Or you can't believe it without context. You need to have some additional context behind before you start taking things. There has been nothing official confirmed from Disney, from Star Wars, from Filoni, from Favreau. No other reputable source has said anything about this. And I can say right now that pretty definitively it will not be called Heir to the Empire for a variety of reasons. But the primary one is that the stories that are told in there and the characters that are in that book have already been addressed in primary canon. So going back and doing this, like, for example, we have Thrawn, but in a new context, in a new way, who is not the character that is in those books. Mara Jade has already been said by many, many times for many, many years by Lucas, no matter how much people want to laugh and joke about it. Filoni is not going to bring a character like Mara Jade into the Star Wars canon.
Nope.
Lucas hated it, never wanted it, never accepted it. Filoni's basically his apprentice. Filoni agrees with not everything, but carrying on the legacy. And I don't think Filoni believes at all that characters like Mara Jade should be in the primary, at least not in that context. You can accomplish that storytelling stuff with other characters. You don't need to bring someone like this in. There's nothing they really solve for, because they develop later into other non-canon things, into a love interest for Luke, and that's just not about anything that Lucas ever wanted. So I think most everything that comes from those novels is being addressed already, or has been addressed already in the stories, is bringing about the stories in the Ahsoka TV show and other places. There would be no need to do this. It wouldn't actually help any. And bringing in Jorah Sabaoth into canon, while you might be able to do that, they're already bringing the cloning thing and Mount Tannis and all that. They've already brought that in through the Bad Batch. So all these other elements have come into Star Wars. There's no reason to remake this, because you're not adding anything that hasn't already been added. So I don't want to get people spun up that I'm like talking this person out. And I do not mean to call out this Twitter, this user. So please don't give this person shade at all. That's not the intent of this. The intent really is leading into this conversation about like the writer's strike and things, we should all be having conversations that come from things that include context to sort of better understand where is this stuff coming from, and what is the impetus for someone posting something like this? Because this person probably loves Heir of the Empire. I love Heir of the Empire. I think a lot of Star Wars fans do. That's a great series, and I love the idea of what's coming out of that. This person happens to have a different opinion about what should show up next in movies and TV shows than I do, but that's just a difference of opinion. That's a non-event. That's just difference of opinion. That happens all the time.
I think a big part of this too, Jeff, is the effects of hashtag release the Snyder Cut, which is because one there was no Snyder Cut. They made it afterwards. There was no Snyder Cut. There was an assembly cut, and if you've worked in this industry, then you know that an assembly cut is just basically the first pass at basically editing the film of a movie together into a cohesive storyline. And an assembly cut is like typically like in a 2.5 hour movie, you might have like a 4 hour or 4.5 hour assembly cut. And so people get confused with that. And I'm sorry, like this has always like bothered me. There was no Snyder Cut. They released a cut but there was a want for one. And they just basically, people started putting that out there. And I think that there is a desire, especially from the Star Wars fan base, to get back to basics and to get back to things that they know. And there is like a huge hit right now on nostalgia. I'm guilty of it because I loved Picard season 3. And that was like there was like a great story, but then also a ton of nostalgia. And I think that what's happening, especially with with all the upheaval in writers' strikes and where the Star Wars franchise is going, that I think people are hoping to stir the pot by building up some type of consensus on like, hey, why don't you just go and do this?
Yeah.
And if they can just plant the seed out there, it can go viral and take off. And you see that already happening with other things. You would have not had a Strange New World show for Star Trek if you didn't have people say, yeah, there's going to be, or now how they're doing the same thing with Star Trek Legacy, that people put those things out there and get it out. And again, I see Rich here. He totally understands. Obviously, Rich, huge fan of Star Trek Picard season 3. But my point is that I think people just kind of get that hope out there. And now we have so much interaction with people like Dave Filoni online, with people like the people that are inside, like set designers on Andor are responding to people's comments on Twitter. I think that's what's happened now, Jeff, is that we have so much ability to, as a fan base, to actually address some of those things. Yeah, so I think that we have a lot going on. I just think we have a lot going on right now in the community. But yeah, I think too there's like a lot of hopes and wishes. I will say the thing that I thought was really interesting is there's already enough great fodder that's coming out of leaks in Lucasfilm that you don't need to have this other stuff. Like, Jeff, I'm sure you saw that Damon Lindelof was brought in to consult on a future Star Wars movie that is now going to be the movie that is going to feature the Rey character.
Oh, yes.
And the first pass of that script was to have Rey be very, 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 like, very much older than what she is now. And they had already done some like perspective fan casting, because obviously when you're screenwriting, you can go and say, I think that this actor would be a good fit for this. This is the actor I was thinking of. And they were thinking of casting Helen Mirren as a future
Okay.
Rey.
I mean, if it's that far in the future,
And,
sure. Okay.
and what's funny about that is that type of leak is legit. That's like a treatment that came from Damon Lindelof, who is doing, by the way, a lot better from his Prometheus days. That is by the way, Rich, if you want a curse word, Prometheus. If anybody wants a movie that will frustrate you, go watch Damon Lindelof's Prometheus.
When you say Prometheus, are you talking about the Alien or something else?
Yes, the Alien movie, Prometheus.
Yeah, no.
It is a frustrating movie.
I watched about a few minutes of it, and I'm like, no, I'm done.
But my point is that there's so many leaks that are already happening about storylines that they're working on. Taika Waititi's movie, the pitches that are being done. We don't need to even like take guesses at it. We can just take at the legit leaks that are out there, and you can tell that I think Lucasfilm is going back to basics. They are going back to the basics of what they could get out of Star Wars. I don't think they're taking some things from the novels that are appearing in some of the streaming properties, but I 100% think that they're looking at how they start over. And that's and even rebuild their fan base, reconnect with their fan base, expand their fan base. And unfortunately it's happening at a time where there's also a writer's strike.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
I am hopeful that I know we've talked about this before a little bit, but I am hopeful that as they do this, I mean, one, the announcements of, a new movie with Rey, in the future, starting her own Jedi temple, that mirrors obviously, or I wouldn't say mirrors, but it sort of echoes on Luke starting his temple. But rather than us, we saw a brief of that when Luke first beginning, and that's all we get. So the idea of a different character carrying that on, I like that, rather than recasting Luke as something else to be younger and try to bring in the whole Jedi Academy sort of thing. I like that. I like that there was the two other movies. One of them was 25,000 years in the past, at the start of the Jedi.
Way in the past.
Way in the past. And there was another one, a third one that they announced, but I can't remember the details on that. They announced a third one in there someplace too that was also in the past, but I don't remember exactly which that was. What I'm hopeful for is that while they touch on these things with Rey and whatever, a couple of things. One, and we've talked about this before, and I think we're on the same page. I hope they pause on trilogies for a while. Just do a bunch of standalone movies.
Yeah.
If you want to follow more of the Kevin Feige Marvel, where you do a bunch of standalones and where it makes sense, do a culmination or like a milestone kind of movie, like in Avengers. It doesn't have to be Avengers, but like multiple movies where there's a milestone that brings a bunch of characters together for a unique challenge, but then can continue as standalones, something along those lines. I'd be fine with that. I'm not saying you should do it. They should do it, but I'd be okay with something inspired by that idea. I really do hope, though, that with the success, hopefully success of The Acolyte, once that comes out and it's out and people will enjoy it, I hope that we can start to get more High Republic related things, because there's this whole new world of High Republic content that is being written and built upon. I mean, I've been delaying playing the end of Jedi Survivor here on my Xbox. I'm nearly the end, and I'm like, because I just don't want to, there's so much more in the game for me to explore. But once the main storyline is done, games like that to me are like, they're a lot of fun still, but the main storyline is what I'm really there for. And I'm just delaying because I'm like, I don't want to end it, but there is so much High Republic content. Like, the High Republic is a through line for the game. Like, it's one of the main threads in the entire game is that era. So I'm hopeful that they do more with that. I mean, I know they've talked about doing more with that, but they're just not going to jump into saying, cool, I've done a bunch of books, here's a bunch of movies, because they're not quite done with phase 2, and phase 3 is still to come in a little over a year. So there's a lot more books that are still to publish over the next 3 years. So I know they're not trying to jump right into that, but I'm hopeful that can be more like also part of the future of Star Wars, that it doesn't have to just be rooted in the prequel era and things like that. Even I'm good with getting new stories there if there's new interesting stories to tell, but I want to see High Republic. I want to see the unknown regions. I want to see where Thrawn comes from. Like the Thrawn novels, where they talk about like the Grisk The Grisk being these big baddies that happen out there. Like, I want to see more of that stuff because that's completely unexplored territory for us. It's totally
Yeah.
new. They don't even think about the Force. There aren't Force users in that area so much as people who can tap into what we call the Force, or everyone else calls the Force, to do like traversing through hyperspace. But people don't use the Force. So it's like a whole other. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. Bringing this back to
No,
sort of
no, no.
the
I'm right there with you.
but like
And this
bringing
is
this
where
back
I
to the
think.
writer strike stuff, I think the context thing and the idea of new stories, you know, we can sit here and talk about as nerds, and I mean that in the most affectionate way possible. we sit here and talk about all these things we would love to see out of this.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day, no matter what anybody wants to make, someone's got to write these things. They've got to come up with the ideas and the
Yes.
stories. And as much as this is to me, this is why the context behind information we see out there matters so much. It's that the writers aren't just on strike, and you can talk about this a lot more than I can, or more informed than I can. But the writers aren't just on strike because, like, we hear like other strikes that happen, teachers unions, whatever. They're not just on strike because they just don't get paid enough money. Yes, teachers have a big problem. That's a whole other thing. But the situation that writers are in forces them to almost never have a full time job, and
Yes.
and it's gotten worse in the last few years, especially since the pandemic. And you can I'd love you to talk more about what those semantics look like, because I think most people don't understand the even more ephemeral nature of a writer's job in Hollywood or other places in that industry, and how much worse it has become for them. That it becomes really difficult to live an actual life and have a family and expenses in the situation that they become in. Much more so than teachers not making enough money is clearly a bad thing, but they have a full-time job essentially. There's benefits that are associated, there's other things that come with it. Whether
Right.
they're not enough is, yes, that's a valid conversation, but they have a full-time job. Writers, it's not the same thing.
No, writers. Jeff knows this. My original degree is in English. For a long time, I really wanted to get into this industry, and I learned a tremendous amount about it. But one of the big things that's happened in the industry is, I mean, the pandemic obviously like changed a lot of things, but streaming changed everything. And what's really funny is there's never been a time where more creativity was needed rapidly, fast. Like, you got to be able to write all this stuff so fast. You got to come up with ideas so fast. You have to be able to create what is essentially now all of these serialized storylines. So instead of writing a half-hour television show, you're now in a writer's room that's doing a 10-hour movie. And it's like it boggles the mind, the demands on writers today from because of streaming services. But the pay for writers has not come along. And I can put this in an example. So when you're a writer, working for any type of show, let's just say, I'll just use Star Trek: The Next Generation because I follow a lot of the writers that worked on that show. And what'll happen is that you might create a character, for example. You might be submitting a script that you've created a set of characters, and that then becomes maybe its own set of franchises. In fact, oftentimes when you do that and they know that's going to be a popular figure, to the producers will actually step in. The executive producers will step in and actually take writing credit, so that way they can own more of the character. And that's because of a thing that's tied to your residual payments and your rights payments. And when television was broadcasting those shows, you would get a residual check. So every time something would go from a first run, which is the very first time that it was shown on TV, broadcast TV, and then move into syndication, you would get a residual check for how often those came in. And that was usually like negotiated with your agent and the studio, and you figured out exactly how much money you would get out of your residuals. Now, that same type of system isn't being carried over into streaming. And those writers, those old writers that produced amazing television that we all love, a lot of those writers are being left behind because they had high demands coming into the streaming era. And studios were like, we're not going to work with you guys, because they saw right away. They were like, hey, I'm not going to get paid the same amount. I'm actually going to lose a lot of money in these deals now. And so they were holding on back in like 2017, 2018, really pushing back against the studio machine. So what did the studios do? They went and found people that could write stories that had never really written for television before. And that's why we actually got a lot of substandard writing, or a lot of cliched or freshman drama class writing, where it was like, this is not good, this does not look good. And then they started to blend these two groups together, more veteran writers with emerging writers. It'll actually open up a tremendous amount of opportunity to bring in new thoughts. Like, you have a lot of really smart people now that are able to come in and do some really great writing, like or bring even some veteran people back, like Terry Metalis, and be able to have them come in and be able to do these types of things. But they still weren't getting paid. And that's really what people forget. It's not show charity, it's show business.
Yes.
And these people right now, the people that are writing these stories that we care about, the ones that we really enjoy, like Jeff, you buy novels and you buy comic books, and so do I. Those residual checks, those deferred checks, go right back to the writers and the authors as a part of their deal. But every time we go and watch every time I watch the 6th episode of Mandalorian season 1, The Prisoner, the writers of that show don't get a kickback every time I watch it.
Right.
In the same way that they would have had they been able to, every time I would have watched it in syndication.
Yep.
And that's the thing that's like killing
100%.
them off.
Yeah, one of the things I don't follow this person, but there's a TikTok account of a very, very well-known writer. Apparently, I'd have to find his name. You'd probably recognize it. But he does these videos where he just talks about, like, what is it? People ask questions, and he's like, they're like, what is it like to get what is a residual? And he just goes through and gives a detail, like, well, let me explain how this whole process works. And he was the first person who explained a lot about what you just described, which is this, on the surface, a seemingly good thing for many years, where, like, you'd hire a series of writers, senior writers who had been doing this for a long time, and then a handful of junior writers. Then, as part of the writing process for the show or the movie, they'd always include a few junior writers, because that way they can learn the new things and they can become senior writers eventually. And that way you always have a pool of writers to work with. And that one of the side effects from a lot of this also is like, oh, well, we can get away with some more junior ones. We'll just bring one or two, sort of the 4 or 5, I'm making the numbers up, but 4 or 5 people from before, and it was a 70-30. We'll reverse that to be mostly junior people with 1 or 2 people consulting on it, and the rest, we don't need all of you because you're too expensive and we're not going to worry about it. But also, you senior people, we're just not going to pay you as much, and we won't give you the residuals or whatever. And one of the side effects it had is their income became substantially less predictable at that point. So it's like, well, now that you're not getting residuals and you get the one check up front, well, now you've got to figure out a way to get another job so that you can get more. You can get the pay, because you got to pay your mortgage, you got to take your senior kids to school or pay for food. Like, you just got to do the thing you got to do in life. But previously, you knew that I'd get a check up front and then some residuals would come through, and so I can have a predictable set of shows that I can do, knowing that I always have a stream of income coming from these things. And if that goes away, well, then it's like having a contracting job where you get one check up front and then do a bunch of work, but nothing else comes in for months. How do you predict how to deal with your life if that's the case? And when I heard it that way, or when I heard that perspective on the situation, it really helped me understand, like, I don't know what I would do if I only got paid once every 3 months up front. Like, that's fine, but if it doesn't anyway, it's just I can empathize with that, because it really affects how your life works.
Yeah, and there's another thing too. So, like, when we were kids, Jeff, there was a period of time in broadcast television where the fall television series would start, and then a series would run all the way until about the summer. And then there would be the summer hiatus for television shows. And that's very old school, but that's essentially how television worked. And typically, if you were a writer that was on staff, you'd have like 26 episodes that you were writing. So you might be writing a full 26 episodes, really doing all that stuff. Now you look at something like a Star Wars show like The Mandalorian, where you might do 10 episodes, or the Book of Boba Fett, where you might do a handful of episodes here. And the people that really are making, and you also have to see too that studios are also losing money, because streaming is still somewhat experimental, and so they're just trying to they're trying to hedge their investment, so they're only trying to spend so much money. That's why that's bred all of this genius, like that studio where, oh yeah, we now have these digital screens behind us, so that way we can create the backgrounds that we need rather than shooting on location. They're trying to reduce costs left and right to maximize profits against these shows, but they're starting to do the balancing off of the backs of writers.
Yes.
And these are the creatives that are actually making these shows possible. And if you ever want to understand, so in the industry, the way that they break things down is the stage, the live stage is the actor's medium. Films are the director's medium. And television is the writer's medium. And that's because of who has what power where. Like you'll go to a stage play if the acting is great. You'll go to a film typically if the direction of that film is solid. But you'll watch a show week in and week out because of the writing. And then of course the actors bring that too. If you want an example of the role of the writer, typically they're listed as associate producers or executive producers on a television show. And I know this is real inside baseball, but if you want to see how many writers are involved, just see how many people have an executive producer credit on The Mandalorian, or how many people have an executive producer credit on Andor. In those cases, actually, I think there's only a handful of writers that are working on Andor because they had such a solid storyline that they wanted to do. But you're still balancing the budget off of not paying your creatives well. And that's also why actors are aware of where this is going, because they're in the same boat. Their also residual checks are a lot lower too. And that's why they're also trying to stand united with the Writers Guild, because they know that how the Writers Guild goes is how the Screen Actors Guild is going to go.
Yep.
And that's it's just what it is. It's a business. Unfortunately, for everyone that cares about shows like Andor's been directly impacted. Yes. Andor has a writer's room. Those writers cannot write. If you watch there's a number of movies that are being put on hold because you can't write. And what I mean by that is it's writing of any kind at any moment. And I'll give an example that a friend of mine shared with me who was also working in this industry, which is, okay, you write your script, but sometimes you're a consulting writer or you're script doctoring. So that's another thing that you might be doing. You might be punching up some writing, but there's also punch ups that happen, and this happens a lot with streaming productions because they're moving so fast. There's punch ups that happen on site or within a 24 or 48 hour period of filming. You can't have that punch up right now. They can't do that kind of writing. You might have an actor that's working out a scene and saying, I don't really like this. I don't really think this fits. And that might go back to the writer's room. Those writers cannot answer those questions right now. So then you're just dealing with the production staff that's able to, and the actor. And if an actor is willing to then write their own line, they're breaking faith with the Writers Guild. So that's why all of these things become interrelated.
Yeah.
That's why productions have to pause, even if a script is done.
Yep.
Because what happens is that you still need creatives to be a part of this journey all the way around.
I can imagine.
And unfortunately, it's impacted Andor.
I can imagine, as I think you may have described it, as even once you're filming, you still need writers available. I have to imagine this. You still need writers available because there's going to be last minute changes to the script or updates or whatever else. You need someone to does this actually rework in some way? They're just not just hey, you're done. Great. Thanks for the help with this. And they're out. And then you don't need anything else at that point. I can't imagine that's actually the case.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. I grew up in a union household. You also don't want to be a scab. You don't want to be someone that's stepping in that's helping to keep them on strike. And the industry is very small. I mean, yeah. It's just it's our own industry, Jeff. It's just like our own industry. Yeah. And the weird thing is that the way that they're coming up with some of these writers is the same way that I think everyone's probably encountered this at some time, which is you get a job and you're like, hey, how much am I going to get paid? And you're like, I want to know. And and you're like, well, you're going to get paid not that much, but you're going to get a lot in exposure. That's how they're dealing with a lot of these writers. But as you know, and I know, and everybody knows, you can't pay your mortgage with exposure. And so that's really where this is coming from.
Yeah, when you're in the early part of your career, that's a trade-off you can do because you can make it work. Yeah. Like, hey, I need the exposure. I need to get my name out there. But once you've been in your career for a while, hopefully,
yes.
Once you've been in your career for a while, yeah, exposure is not dollars and cents. Like no mortgage company takes a piece of paper saying I've got $200,000 and 200,000 exposure points. Like, sorry, that's not it's not a fungible piece of currency, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's and it really is unfortunate, but I empathize entirely with them because, and I'm not worried about any piece of content coming out, like TV shows or whatever, at any time.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They're just it's not that they're just entertainment. They're great entertainment, but people's livelihoods and their families are substantially more important than a TV show that doesn't come on the date they said it would. At least not for me. I would much rather people be able to pay their bills and things. And it's interesting because I was thinking about this in the terms of like inflation. I was listening to an episode of Planet Money, which is here in the States at least, NPR, National Public Radio, has a number of podcasts. And one of them is an economics podcast called Planet Money. And they were doing an entire conversation around what might be driving inflation. And it's a general conversation about things. And one of the topics in there is like there's two parts to inflation that make up inflation. And one of them is like workers' wages and corporate profits. Those are essentially the two main components that make up kind of the economy, essentially, and can drive to inflation. But what's never really been talked about, at least not for a very long time, is the corporate profit side. It's always, because most of the time it has been labor that has been a place of drivers of inflation, whatever. At least that's what most common thoughts have been. And it's starting to be re-examined and being open to question that maybe corporate profit is actually a part of this. And not just generally speaking, but in specific because of the pandemic, because of what corporations, a lot of them did is, and I'll get to a point back to the writers thing in a second. This is not meant to be a rant.
No, I know exactly where you're going, dude. Hey, by the way, like, workers of the world unite.
Yes.
All you have to do, the only thing you have to lose is your chains.
Yeah, exactly. It's
come on, comrade. No,
exactly. What they were talking about essentially is the idea that we take it so much out on labor for so long, reduce wages, whatever else, to get the right profit so businesses can stay afloat, etc. But on the flip side to that, pandemic was the thing that really shot this up. Is that a lot of businesses predicted that in 2021 their supply chain costs and other business costs would go up. It hadn't happened yet, but they predicted it would, and so they increased their profits they increased what they charged to consumers as a result of that. But they put that in place almost a year in advance. It did end up happening for most businesses where supply chain costs and all that went up, but they did it like in a year in advance. And then as supply chain costs started to kind of normalize in some areas, no business went and reduced their price. By and large, businesses didn't reduce their what they charged their customers. So their profits the profits actually increased as a result. Even if the price stayed nice and high, the profits increased because the supply chain costs started to go back down. And so what the conversation was much more around is you're not reducing what you're charging to people, but you're still in this case, in the writer's case, almost forcing your costs to go down while maintaining your prices nice and high, rather than saying, well, we need to shift these, or hey, we need to pay no worries, pay the writers more money. We're going to charge more for monthly for your streaming service. We got to pay people more, so you're going to have to pay more. I think by and large, while people might complain about price increases for streaming service Y on any of the week, knowing that people are getting to actually take home a livable wage as a result of you paying a couple extra bucks per month for a streaming service, people might complain at first, but they do it because you want the content that you want. But knowing that I don't want to pay more for, I'm going to pick on Netflix, but whatever. I don't want to pay this $1 a month more for Netflix because I don't want to pay that $1 or I can't afford it. If you can't afford it, I understand. But I don't want to pay it $1 more but even if you know that it's actually going to help out a bunch of people. But right now, it doesn't. Like, it stays high, or you pay more for potentially Netflix or another network, but no one's getting paid more to do the work to create the thing that you want. The corporation's potentially just making more money. I don't know that for fact, so this is just me making up a hypothetical, but hearing that in the economics podcast really put this situation with the writers into a lot of perspective for me, because it's not just what the writers are dealing with, it's also companies are not, it's being brought to light that companies are not reducing what they're making off of the backs of the labor behind it, yet they're not wanting to provide the labor the things that they want. And so it's like, well, and the writer's strike is the culmination of, that's it, we're done. You want us, you want us to make your content for you and make you the money that you're wanting to make and the high prices you want to charge, you've got to have to pay us the way that we need to be paid. And as far as I know, they're not asking for a whole hell of a lot of money in this. Like, they're not asking.
They're really just asking for as much money as they had been getting paid. That's about it. But
Yes,
but you hit
that's
the
what I
nail
heard
on
as
the
well.
head. What that does is that it takes away from what are newly discovered corporate profits. Because as you know, like, the first thing that you do is where you make your money in the margins. You know, Jeff and I are a part of an industry that's all about that. And I would say too, like, I understand the pressures from a corporate structure down, because of the fact that if you're a publicly traded company, you want to keep showing better and better revenue figures, because that assures your stockholders. It's an endless cycle where I get it. It's almost like a snake eating its own tail.
Mm-hmm.
But for entertainment, the entertainment industry, where they forget where their bread and butter is in their ability to tell compelling stories and then bring them to life. And that is what attracts people. I mean, you look at the original Star Wars. The original Star Wars is made almost on a shoestring budget. They don't have a lot, but they have enough to just get by. But the story is so compelling that we're talking about it, almost 50 years later. I mean, it's insane what that story has done.
Hold on with your almost 50 years later. Like, I am not almost 50. Calm down. I still have over 6 more years to go. You calm down.
I just celebrated a birthday, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did we get here, world?
I know. The other day, my wife and I were talking about this, and we're like, oh yeah, so what are we gonna do when my son's out of the house, or not out of the house, when he turns 18, I'll be 55, which is a little over 10 years for me. And I'm like, wait, hold on. We just gloss over the fact that in like about 6 years, I'm going to be 50. I'm like, okay, hold on. I don't need this conversation right now. I'm not ready for that just yet.
No. But this underscores the point, is that we grew up with a story that was so compelling.
Yeah.
That it's around now into our middle age as we get there, as we get even older. And now our kids are able to enjoy it. And that's what I'm saying. Pay your writers. Because these are the people that really make these stories valuable. And I'll get off my soapbox here, but I actually think I always try to find the bright side of this. And I would say this. This is a moment of pause that I actually think Disney and Kathleen Kennedy need. Mm-hmm. I think it's fine, actually, to not have productions moving forward.
Agreed.
Because I think that this is a moment where they really need to settle down, and especially coming out of Mandalorian season 3, which, what's the phrase? The mistakes were made. I feel like this is a moment of pause to say, what do we really want? What stories do we want to tell?
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to do other than let's make money? Like what is it that you want to tell? What story do you want to tell with this property? Jeff, you were talking about a lot of the figures that could appear in stories, whether they're High Republic figures, whether it's things from the unknown region. A lot of those characters can act in service of a story that you want to tell. And again, I love Andor. I love Andor so much because it was a story that someone wanted to tell end to end. You might, not you, Jeff, but the general, you might like it, you might not. But there was a story that you wanted to tell behind that. I think Disney needs to take a moment and say, what do we want to tell? I think Amazon got lost because Amazon was so wrapped up in, wow, we have access to Lord of the Rings. We're gonna make a Lord of the Rings show. that I think they even kind of got lost in what's the story that you want to tell, not just how you execute it, but what is it that you want to tell. And that this time, let's look at the silver lining here. You can't work with your creatives because they're on strike, and you can't work with your actors because they want to wait until the writers are done. Start working on that larger vision. What's the more than the valuation of the property to be able to sell tickets and sell subscriptions? What's the story that you want to tell? Because that is what will, you answer that.
Mm-hmm.
And if it resonates, it makes money all the way downstream, everywhere else.
Yep.
And you're not answering a quantity issue of, we got to get this many episodes, this many shows out, so that way the writers can get paid this much. But instead, it's a quality metric that can get everybody paid.
And we've definitely touched on that before, where, and I think you've said this, and we've echoed it a few times on the show over the last year or two, that one of the big values of the Star Wars, the original trilogy of Star Wars movies coming out so far apart from each other, is that that's all you had. And when the next one came out, it became this whole new era of thing for you. And what has kind of happened, and Marvel has been guilty of this as well. And as much as I love the Marvel content, I absolutely do. When you have 3 to 4 movies come out in 1 year, this actually happened to me with Quantumania. And not to throw any shade at it, I enjoyed watching the movie. But am I going to watch it again on Disney Plus? Probably not for a while, until like I need to come back and like rewatch a couple scenes to make sure I understood something. But it's a good movie. It's a well-made movie, but so much has come out in the last couple of years, that as good as stories as they are, they start to get lost amongst each other. Like we'll go see Guardians of the Galaxy at some point here soon. I've heard it's an amazing movie. My worry with it though is that everything is so close together that it's hard to, you start to lose the essence of what's actually supposed to be happening. Like I've kind of lost, like, knowing that the end result of this era right now is going to be, in the Marvel world, is going to be, what is it called? Something of Kang. I don't forget the name. Something of Kang.
Yeah.
And then the second one's going to be Secret Invasion. And those are cool, but I'm kind of lost between the two because, like, well, we just got to introduce to Kang. We've had a bunch of stuff that's, I think, Secret Invasion related, but we're not sure. And it was my point. The point that I'm trying to make is simply that I don't want to see that sort of fatigue happen with the Star Wars, and it's starting to be if this writer's strike hadn't happened, it was starting to get there. Like, I love everything that's coming out, but I seriously have 2 other Star Wars books up here that I ordered recently, part of Phase 2 of the High Republic, that I haven't, like this one that just came out the other day, and I got it. I haven't started reading it. I have 3 boxes full of comic books here that I haven't had a chance to get to read. Like, there's new stuff that's coming out, and I'm like, you get to a point where, like, I don't know how to catch up with any of this. And now I'm kind of lost in the story. And I'm good now, but I can very easily see that being a reality in the next few months, the next 6 months. And I don't want that to happen for anybody, because these stories should be enjoyable and fun, and you should be able to consume them and really be a part of them. And I'm with you that I don't like that the writers have had to go on strike to get the thing that they need for their livelihoods. And I'm hoping that one of the unintended benefits of this will be exactly what you described, that, you know, the Kathleen Kennedys and the Bob Igers and others at other studio houses will be able to take this time and sit back and say, okay, hold on. Is this actually what we want to be doing? Like, are we actually telling stories that make sense for us? Like, are we going... I have faith that with Filoni, specifically Filoni and even Kathleen Kennedy, that they're thinking about it the right way. But when you're in that position, at some point, you're getting enough pressure that it's hard to be as practical as you want to be. Sometimes you're getting the pressure that you need to put something out because corporate profits are a big deal for these businesses. Like you said, it's not show charity, it's show business, or whatever term you used. It's so I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I am hopeful that this will give every house, including the Mouse House, a chance to take a breath for a couple of minutes and just say, are we delivering these things in the right time frames? Should we just give people a little bit longer to kind of cook on these ideas and really enjoy them before we start just pumping out more content?
Yeah, and I think we have to be choosier too as viewers and consumers of this content. Like, we have to kind of let these studios know too, like, this isn't working. Like, it's funny, I remember when I'm a big fan of Doctor Strange, and there's a 6-year gap between the Doctor Strange movies, and I was like, that's great. Like, I remember in being in anticipation of a Doctor Strange movie. And a part of that delay was the pandemic. And so I'm trying to find the silver lining and say, hey, maybe this is a moment of just pause it out. Like,
Yeah.
pause it out, and then maybe along the way, you'll actually, by having fewer properties to maintain, maybe more writers to help govern and create and drive the fewer properties that you have, we'll get a better product.
Yeah.
It won't be rushed, and you'll have more longevity with people like me who are hungry for content, but good content. I don't need any more season 2s of Picard. I need more season 3s.
Right. I don't need more Boba Fett's. No offense. Sorry, Boba
yes,
Fett.
exactly.
I don't need more seasons of Boba Fett. I need the Mandalorian with a really tight storyline that follows the path they're trying to follow. Not just make something because you can make it or people want it. It's like
exactly. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'll put that up there. The Boba Fett season, and when people have asked me what you think about it, like I've watched it, and I'm not gonna throw shade at it. This is not meant to be. I'm diminishing what it does. To me, now that I really had the time to think about it, and you and I have talked about it ad nauseum, the way that I frame it in my own mind now is the Boba Fett season is what you get when you're almost too focused on let's make this for the fans. That's what happens to me, because it isn't a story. It is not put out there with a story that is so cohesive. They're like, holy shit, this is really fantastic. No, I gave you a bunch of fan service, and I shouldn't say that phrase. Fans wanted something, so I built it for you. But there isn't much for him out there, so you didn't really. And the best part of that season was the Mandalorian parts. It was not the Boba Fett parts. And it's like, that should be a clear indication to you that it maybe could have been written and written better and directed better in the first few episodes, but it's not cohesive. And like, to me, don't make a story just because people want a story. Make a story because there's an actual good story to tell here. People want stories all the time. They want story. Keep making that. Make that season go longer. Make another Obi-Wan season. I'm like, please don't, because the story can end. It doesn't need to keep going. Let things end.
Guess what? Those Jurassic Park movies, I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
The Jurassic World movies, they did not need to be made.
No, I agree.
But people kept going to them. People got to stop going to these things.
Yes.
Because this is telling studios, hey, you know what we're really doing? We don't need to work with it. It's funny. I saw someone's note here about how let AIs run, and then pass the savings. Read the studios pass the savings on to creative.
It'd be basically like the end. What that person was. We pull it back up. Aggressively relaxing said that. We'll pull that. That's basically like the last episode of She-Hulk, where she meets the creative at the end in the last episode, and it's the AI that's driving everything. I'm like, yeah, that's basically this. Make it an AI that drives the things, and all the creatives get paid to do the work.
Yes, and I think what's funny about that too is, like, I think the opposites happened, where everything's so analytics driven. Like, all of these shows are being based on, like, hey, but Jurassic World Dominion made this much money, and so like I feel like we're constantly having these two extremes happen, where we over rotate into writers that are trying to write almost novelizations into television shows, which is just not working out.
No.
And that's like, those stories just aren't working. And then on the other side, it's like all analytics driven, which is like, if we can just get to this market, they spend this much money, and that's the market that we want to get, because we're not dealing with advertisers. We're actually going to sell that data for other products, so that way these people can consume. It just needs to. There's a happiness in the middle here, and yeah, like, because again, that's this lack of understanding of the value of a great story is why we get these Jurassic World movies or the Transformers movies. And I'm sorry if you like them. They should
have stopped so many years ago. Sorry,
the Fast and the Furious movies are heaven sent. Those are some of the greatest movies of all time. I don't know why. I could say that they're garbage, but they are.
I have no comment. I have no comment to make about the Fast and the Fast.
They went to space. in a car in the last movie.
Yeah, moving on. I'm
Keep
just gonna
making
leave
those
that alone.
ones.
But no, I'm with you, dude. The Transformers movies. If you like everyone watching, sorry, if you like them, love the thing that you love, and that's fine. I'm not calling you out. But to me, those Transformers movies need to stop many years ago. So many years ago.
They keep making them.
They keep making them because they're big and there's explosions and I don't know. Anyway, we hope this. I really hope this kind of helps everybody today because it's.
We Jeff and I totally 100% in support of the Writers Guild.
Yes,
we are
100%.
with you, and simultaneously, I will say that if you're really interested too in my Fast and Furious comment, just know that all of the Marvel people are ending up in Fast and Furious movies now. You can now see Captain Marvel in a new.
You know what's funny?
Fast and Furious movie.
Reminding me of the what was that? That really dumb. Sorry, I'm gonna say it. Really dumb movie that Sly Stallone. Was it The Replacements? Was that what it was called?
Oh.
No, it was the one where it was all the action heroes. Like
the
Expendables.
It's funny. The Expendables. Thank you.
Yeah, they did like 3 of them, and in each one
they only needed to do one.
Let's just be honest. They didn't actually need to do one. Need is a very strong word there. It's more of like they kind of wanted to do one. They didn't need to. But every movie they brought in another like retired old dated actor, action star actor.
Yes.
And like Van Damme was the
90s.
Bad guy in one of them. They brought in Chuck Norris into one of them.
Great.
Like then they started pulling in like the B field of like action hero actors that people were like, oh, I guess I've kind of seen you in an action movie, right? I there was one time like out in '87 in June, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, dude, you just need to stop. Like nobody needs to see any of this stuff.
Oh no, those movies. I'm telling you, Jeff, they're all garbage except for the Fast and Furious trilogy, saga. Because of this one,
you're cutting out there, Brian. What was that? I can't.
Okay, one. You could go. Okay, look. If you liked Captain Marvel, if you liked people in Star Wars, they're all in the Fast and Furious movies now, which is somehow a superhero movie.
That doesn't make it 20th good, though.
Yes, it does. Because 20 years ago, those movies came out, and it was about a group of people stealing TV, DVD, VCR combos. That is how those movies started.
You know what? And when the first movie came out, I watched that first movie so many times. I love it. Mostly because I just wanted to see what's his name? The bald-headed guy. I wanted to see him.
Vin Diesel. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I wanted to see him drive that '69 Charger because I was huge when it came out. I was super huge into classic cars, and I'd see that thing. I'm like, oh my god, this car. It didn't perform at all like a real car would, but when you see it, I'm like, this is just a sexy car, and so I loved it for that. I didn't care about all the other cars. I really just liked American horsepower type stuff at the time. I was young and not very smart at the time, but not that I'm much smarter. I'm just older now.
It's great.
Anyway, all right, we are.
Jeff, I'm telling you, I know we got to close out the show. Our next show's got to be about these Fast and Furious movies because I'm telling you,
totally,
literally, I'm all about it.
You know what? I have an idea for you. We will find you a guest co-host to do that episode, that special episode with, because I can't really speak to them, and what I can say isn't terribly positive.
Oh, Jeff. Anyway, hey, thank you all.
Thanks
so much
everybody for being here.
It's been great.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. We will be back next Friday, so we'll see you. Talk to you all soon.
Bye, everybody.